He makes me sick. Those are the words Paul McGrath once used about people who make him genuinely angry. At 65 years old, the man they called God at Villa Park has lived through more battles than most footballers could imagine. Some battles were on the pitch, others were inside his own mind. But the ones he remembers most, the ones with people who betrayed him, disrespected him, or tried to erase him completely. This is not a story about a gentle giant who forgave everyone. This is about a man who fought racism in orphanages, threatened teammates with violence, and never forgot the manager who offered him money to disappear. Before we understand who Paul McGrath refuses to forgive, we need to understand where his anger comes from. Born in London in 1959 to an Irish mother and a Nigerian father, McGrath's very existence was a problem. In mid-century Ireland, being mixed race was not just different, it was wrong in the eyes of many. His mother, terrified of the shame, placed him in foster care. He ended up in Dublin orphanages. The orphanage was where McGrath learned to fight. Other children called him names because of his skin colour. He fought back constantly, but he admits he did not win most of those fights. The bullying was relentless. He only realised he was different when he looked in a mirror. McGrath spent his youth battling to be Irish. He was not just trying to fit into a football team. He was trying to fit into a nation that did not always want him. This created a survival instinct. There were people who accepted him, like his mother, and later managers like Graham Taylor. Then there were people who tried to exclude him. McGrath learned to tell the difference quickly, and he never forgot which side someone was on. Before the bright lights of Manchester and Birmingham, there was Inchicore. McGrath's nickname, the Black Pearl of Inchicore, came from his time with St Patrick's Athletic in the League of Ireland. This period was critical in building his bond with working-class Irish people. Unlike many internationals who were English-born with Irish grandparents, McGrath was seen as one of us, a local hero who had risen from the hard streets of Dublin. This status gave him unique armour. When he moved to England, he carried the hopes of a specific part of Irish society. Failure would not just be a sporting disappointment, it would validate every doubt he had fought since the orphanage. McGrath's career in England lasted from 1982 to 1998. During that time, racism on the terraces was everywhere. Players heard vile abuse from crowds every week. But McGrath's view on this is surprising. He says he heard the odd shout from racists during his playing days. He tolerated it. His way of dealing with it was simple. Play well, upset the person shouting, prove them wrong. This was the orphanage strategy adapted for stadiums. Endure, perform, and prove them wrong. But McGrath draws a sharp line between the racism of the past and the racism of today. He sees something darker now. He says there are groups of people who intimidate black players in organised ways. This is not one drunk fan shouting abuse. This is coordinated hate, social media campaigns, ultra-right-wing groups in stadiums. To McGrath, this is unforgivable because it is premeditated, it is not ignorance, it is weaponised malice. This shift in his thinking is personal. McGrath has a son named Nick. Despite his legendary status, McGrath fears that, because of his colour, there will always be someone who treats his son differently. He could forgive the racism he faced because he survived it. He cannot forgive the racism that threatens his children. The groups of people intimidating black players today are enemies of his family's future. McGrath's refusal to follow the crowd got him into trouble in 2011. When Luis Suarez was accused of racially abusing Patrice Evra, most people picked a side. McGrath took a third path. He publicly defended Suarez, suggesting the use of the term negrito might have been cultural rather than hateful. He stated he knew 100% that Suarez was not racist. This defence triggered a public dispute with Glenn Johnson, the Liverpool and England defender who was also a black player. McGrath's reaction was telling. He wrote that it saddens me that Glenn Johnson has called me a racist. For a man who fought physically in orphanages against racial slurs, being labelled an enabler of racism by a fellow professional was a deep insult. This incident reveals something important. McGrath is unforgiving, not of those who make mistakes, but of those who mischaracterise his intentions. He was willing to give Suarez the benefit of the doubt, but being corrected on racism, an experience he feels he owns, was unforgivable. If the battle against racism is a war against a faceless enemy, the battle against Sir Alex Ferguson was a duel with a titan. The conflict between the two men in the late 1980s is the pivot point of McGrath's career. It is the moment he was told he was finished, and the moment he decided he had barely begun. To understand the Ferguson feud, we need to understand the Manchester United of the mid-1980s. Under Ron Atkinson, the club thrived on a relaxed culture where social bonding, often involving large amounts of alcohol, was encouraged. McGrath, alongside Norman Whiteside and Brian Robson, formed the core of a drinking school that ruled the dressing room. For McGrath, alcohol was not just recreation. It was medication for his crippling social anxiety and physical pain. When Alex Ferguson arrived in 1986, he viewed this culture as a cancer. Ferguson's first match in charge was a 2-0 defeat to Oxford United. McGrath's performance that day led Ferguson to later describe the player as being clearly destroyed by alcohol. This initial impression hardened Ferguson's heart against McGrath from day one. The conflict culminated in 1989 in an event McGrath views with bitterness and disbelief. Ferguson, exhausted by McGrath's recurring knee issues and off-field problems, summoned him to his office. The offer was stark. Manchester United would pay McGrath $100,000 to retire immediately. The condition was absolute. He had to stop playing football altogether and go back to Ireland. This was not a transfer listing. It was an erasure. Ferguson was essentially saying McGrath was so broken, so toxic, that it was worth paying 6 figures just to ensure he never played again. For McGrath, this was the ultimate rejection. It confirmed every insecurity from the orphanage, that he was unwanted, broken, and destined for the scrap heap. McGrath admits he considered the offer. "I was thinking about it because $100,000 back then was quite a lot of money," he recalled. However, the intervention of his drinking school allies, Brian Robson and Kevin Moran, saved his career. Gordon Taylor of the PFA eventually marched into Ferguson's office and delivered a counter-ultimatum. "Paul's playing on. You can fine him. You can do what you want, but he's going to play football here or somewhere else." McGrath's subsequent move to Aston Villa was not just a transfer, it was an act of defiance. While he later admitted Ferguson was right for the club to move him on, the personal nature of the retirement offer remained a sore point. McGrath noted that he often expressed a desire to prove Ferguson wrong. Every tackle won for Villa, every Player of the Year award, was a silent message to the man who tried to pay him to quit. While the Ferguson feud was a clash with authority, McGrath's conflicts with his teammates reveal the raw, aggressive undercurrents of the Republic of Ireland's golden generation. The camaraderie of Jack Charlton's team is legendary, but the reality includes friction, threats, and physical violence. The relationship between Paul McGrath and Steve Staunton shatters the illusion of universal brotherhood within the Irish squad. McGrath's disdain for Staunton is palpable. He characterises Staunton not as a rival, but as a nuisance, a player who used to love moaning and could moan for Ireland. The conflict reached breaking point during a match where Staunton's incessant complaining broke McGrath's famously high tolerance. Staunton came over and started swearing at McGrath. In a rare display of overt aggression against a teammate, McGrath delivered a chilling ultimatum. "If you swear at me once more, I'll knock you out." This incident is revealing, because McGrath was generally known for his passivity. For him to threaten physical unconsciousness suggests Staunton had violated a sacred code of respect. McGrath, the senior professional and superior talent, viewed Staunton's moaning as a form of insubordination. The fact that McGrath lists this as a key memory suggests he never truly forgave Staunton. If the Staunton feud was psychological, the conflict with Niall Quinn was visibly physical. During an Aston Villa versus Manchester City match, the two Irish internationals, friends off the pitch, engaged in a violent altercation. Quinn, playing for City, challenged McGrath in the air. McGrath, feeling Quinn came straight through me, retaliated. The two men squared up. The incident is notable for the collateral damage. Steve Staunton tried to intervene as a peacemaker. In a moment of blind fury, McGrath literally lifted Stan off his feet to get to Quinn. This spat illustrates the compartmentalization of McGrath's psyche. He could be generally good friends with Quinn, but on the pitch, any threat to his physical dominance was met with overwhelming force. The violence of the reaction, tossing Staunton aside like a rag doll, demonstrates the feral intensity beneath McGrath's calm exterior. He forgave Quinn. They remained friends, but the incident serves as a warning. McGrath's forgiveness ended where the white line began. The shadow of Roy Keane looms over any discussion of Irish football feuds. While McGrath and Keane are often seen as kindred spirits, their relationship was defined by a mixture of fear and respect. McGrath described his first encounter with a young Keane as frightening, noting the relentless energy the Corkman possessed. However, unlike the feuds with Staunton or Ferguson, McGrath maintained a supportive stance toward Keane during the infamous Saipan incident in 2002. While the nation was divided, McGrath stated, "If I'd been manager, there's no way I would have sent Roy Keane home." This aligns McGrath with the anti-establishment faction. He saw in Keane a reflection of his own rebellious streak, the same streak that drank Ron Atkinson's brandy and defied Ferguson's retirement order. McGrath's loyalty to Keane suggests that McGrath forgives madness and passion, but rarely forgives disrespect or betrayal. The psychological engine of the second half of McGrath's career was the rejection by Ferguson. Aston Villa became the sanctuary where he rebuilt his identity. One of the most poignant anecdotes occurred during his Villa years. In his autobiography, McGrath details a suicide attempt that left his wrists scarred. Shortly after this attempt, he played a match against Everton. To hide the fresh wounds from the cameras and his teammates, he wore wristbands. In this state, mentally shattered and physically scarred, he produced a man-of-the-match performance. This match is the microcosm of the McGrath paradox. The more broken he was off the pitch, the more untouchable he became on it. If Ferguson is the villain of McGrath's narrative, Graham Taylor is the saint. Taylor, the Villa manager, offered McGrath what Ferguson would not: trust without judgment. Taylor famously managed McGrath's knee condition by allowing him to skip training entirely, wheeling him out only on match days. This relationship highlights that McGrath's unforgiveness is reciprocal. He hated Ferguson because Ferguson tried to discard him. He loved Taylor because Taylor tried to save him. The cult hero status he achieved at Villa was the ultimate revenge on the Manchester United hierarchy. We must address the specific claim. Names 6 players he will never forgive. The research indicates this specific list is likely a myth. There is no primary source where Paul McGrath lists exactly 6 players he hates. However, we can construct a factual list of grievances based on verified conflicts. First, Sir Alex Ferguson, the $100,000 retirement insult. McGrath later admitted professional respect exists, but the personal wound of being called finished remains raw. Every success at Villa was a message to the man who tried to pay him to quit. Second, Steve Staunton, the constant moaning and disrespect. McGrath viewed him as a nuisance who violated the hierarchy of the dressing room. The threat to knock him out indicates deep irritation that never fully healed. Third, Glenn Johnson, the accusation of racism. McGrath expressed deep sadness at being misunderstood on the Suarez issue. For a man who fought racial abuse his entire life, being labelled an enabler was unforgivable. Fourth, organised racist groups. The intimidation of black players. This is the only group McGrath actively condemns with no caveats. He sees modern racism as premeditated, weaponised hate. It threatens his son and the next generation. Fifth, the drinking school enablers, the culture that facilitated his self-destruction. McGrath largely blames himself, but he resents the culture that normalised his addiction. Sixth, himself. The wasted potential and family pain. The person McGrath finds hardest to forgive is the one in the mirror. The talent he squandered. The pain he caused his loved ones. Paul McGrath's life is a testament to the terrifying proximity of genius and tragedy. He was a player who could stop the world's best strikers while being unable to stop his own hands from reaching for a bottle. McGrath does not hold petty grudges. He holds deep existential scars. He forgave the orphanage bullies by becoming a national hero. He forgave Ferguson by becoming the best player in England at Aston Villa. But he refuses to forgive the groups of people who threaten the next generation with the same racial intimidation he fought as a child. In the end, Paul McGrath remains the black pearl, beautiful, rare, and formed by the friction of a hostile world. His list of enemies is short, but his list of battles is endless.